Good morning, gentlemen. Again, I'm coming to you from the Deanship of the Common Year, Magma University, and we are continuing with our online version of the English Second Language course. I am your teacher, Dale Warren, for the second level speaking skill, and we are covering Lesson 3 this morning. Now, as I have told you before, please note, we are doing teaching videos for listening, speaking, reading, and writing, but not for conversation classes. Conversation classes are difficult to do online unless you have a proper webinar. And so Dr. Tariq has said we are not going to worry about online conversation classes. So, what I will be covering is the speaking, and I will be teaching the speaking videos for Book 4. Good. Alright, gentlemen, as I have explained to you all in the previous videos, the textbook I am speaking from is Q Skills for Success, Book 4, Listening and Speaking. And I think you all know what this book looks like, but just in case you don't, it's not going there. All right, never mind. It is the book for listening and speaking. And the section we are covering today is page 58, which is phrasal verbs. All right, so I need you all to get your book and to open it at page 58. I also need you all to have your pen and paper on which you can write if you need to take notes. And I need you to be quite clear. Sorry, let me pause the recording. Okay, gone. I need you to be quite clear that when the work is done, you do have to send your homework to your speaking teachers, whoever is the speaking teacher for your particular speaking class. All right. I take it you're all on page 58 and you all have pen and paper and notebooks or whatever else you need to take notes. Correct. Okay. We are going to look today at something which is called phrasal verbs. So our lesson content for today is phrasal verbs on page 58 of the textbook. And our homework will be from page 59 of the textbook, exercise A and exercise B. And this homework will have to be sent to your normal speaking teacher when it has been done. All right. The notes are fairly difficult, and they also talk about things like transitive and intransitive verbs. And since I am not sure that all of you understand those terms or that you've covered them, we are going to discuss those terms, transitive and intransitive, before we move on to the phrasal verbs themselves. A transitive verb is a verb that takes a direct object. An intransitive verb is a verb that does not take a direct object. You don't have to write all this down. All you have to do is listen. I'm not asking you to write grammar notes today. All right. So, English verbs are divided into two classes: transitive verbs, which take a direct object, and intransitive verbs, which don't take a direct object. When we use a transitive verb. A simple English sentence has three elements. The first element is the subject, and the subject is the thing or the person who does the action. The second element is the transitive verb, which is the action word. And the third element is the object, which is the person or the thing that undergoes the action. So if we look at these examples, if you look at example number 1, Ahmed is doing the action, so Ahmed is the subject. Eats is the verb, it is the action that he does, and the object of that verb is kapsa. Kapsa is the thing that he is eating. If we look at example number 2, Sali is doing the action, so he is the subject. The action itself is reads, that is our verb, and the object is his book. His book is undergoing the action. If you look at the last example, the subject is they. The action they are doing is to play, so our verb is play, and what they are playing is football. So we see in each of these cases that the verb is transitive, which means it makes a direct connection between the subject, Ahmed, and the object, kapsa. It makes a direct connection between the subject, I, and the object, a story. It tells you how the subject is linked to the object. Now, when we use an intransitive verb, the sentence only has 2 elements, not 3 as with a transitive verb. So the subject is the person or the thing who does the action, and the intransitive verb, once again, is the action word. So we say Ahmed sleeps. We cannot put a direct object there. I cannot say Ahmed sleeps a dog. Wrong. He sleeps. He doesn't sleep a dog. He doesn't sleep a computer. He doesn't sleep a hamburger. He simply sleeps. If I say Rian exists, I cannot say Rian exists a milkshake. I cannot say Rian exists his book. Wrong. All we do is we say Rian exists and the sentence ends there. It cannot, the verb is intransitive, so it cannot take a direct object. We can say a mistake occurred. We cannot say a mistake occurred me. We cannot say a mistake occurred Sally. All we can say is a mistake occurred. That doesn't mean we cannot put words in the third box, but they cannot be the direct object. We can say Ahmed sleeps a long time every night, because that is not the object of sleeps. It is simply a temporal phrase telling you how long he sleeps. If I say Rian exists in a world of fantasy, I can say that because a world of fantasy is not the direct object of exist. It is telling you where he exists, but it does not take the action. I can say a disaster happened to Magda. and that is fine. Because it is happening to Magda, she is the indirect object. I cannot say a disaster happened Magda. I cannot use the intransitive verb to govern a direct object. There are other words you can put in the third box, but what you cannot put in the third box is a direct object. So, I can say an error resulted from his carelessness. I cannot say, and that is giving the cause of the error, but I cannot say an error resulted his carelessness, because that makes it the direct object. There are many other words you can put in the third box, but not a direct object. Alright, I hope this makes it a little bit clearer. When we have an intransitive verb, we have a subject, we have an intransitive verb, and we can put other words after the intransitive verb, but they cannot be the direct object. They cannot be a direct object in the way we say Ahmed eats kapsa, and kapsa is a direct object. I tell a story, and the story is a direct object of the verb tell. With an intransitive verb, we cannot do that. Okay. Now, we needed to discuss transitive and intransitive verbs because they lead on to the main topic today, which is phrasal verbs. Phrasal verbs are verbs that have two elements. They have a verb, and then they have what we call a particle. So our first example is sit, and sit is the verb, and the particle is down. Our second example is get ready. Get is the verb, and ready is the particle. Our third example is go on. Go is the verb, and on is the particle. Our fourth example is give up. Give is the verb, and up is the particle. So in each case, the phrasal verb is composed of two things. All of them follow that pattern of the verb first and the particle second. Now, phrasal verbs again fall into two classes. The first class is transitive, where they do take a direct object, or they can take a direct object. The second class is intransitive, where they don't take a direct object. When we use the second class, the intransitive phrasal verbs, in a sentence, we use them as follows. We start with the subject, and then we have the intransitive phrasal verb, and again there is no direct object. So the subject is our children, and the verb is grew up. For those of you who don't know that verb, grow up means to get older or to get bigger. Alright, I will pop in, the subject is I and the verb is pop in. When we say I will pop in on Inaz, it means I will visit Inaz. Okay. Now, you can again put words in the third box. But again, the words in the third box cannot be the direct object. So you can say our children grew up very quickly, because that is an adverbial phrase. It is not a direct object. You can say our children grew up too fast, because that is another adverbial phrase. It is not a direct object. What you cannot say is our children grew up a dictionary. It doesn't work. You cannot use the intransitive verb to govern a direct object. You can say I will pop in on in ours, because there is the on in between. The minute I take away the on, in ours becomes the direct object, and I cannot say I will pop in ours. That is incorrect. So again, when you have an intransitive verb, it cannot take a direct object. So the phrasal verbs that are intransitive, the particle and the verb in front of it are never separated, because you do not have a direct object to go in between. You will say our children grew up, and you can add an adverbial phrase. You can say something like our children grew up in Durban, and that is fine, because you are simply specifying a place. If you said our children grew up Durban, it would be wrong, because then Durban becomes the direct object. Okay. The inseparable phrasal verbs are phrasal verbs where you cannot separate the verb from the particle. And these, sorry, I just need to go up a little bit, are those verbs which are transitive. Okay, so inseparable phrasal verbs are phrasal verbs let me put that in capitals so it stands out. Are transitive phrasal verbs where you cannot separate the verb from the particle. Now, a transitive phrasal verb is something that does take an object. Remember, it is transitive, so it takes an object. So if you look at our first example, I will care for the sick man. The sick man is the object of that sentence. The phrasal verb is care for, and it has the verb care and the particle for. Now, because it is inseparable, we cannot separate the care from the for. So you can say, I will care for the sick man, but you cannot say, I will care the sick man for. Where the phrasal verb is transitive and inseparable, you must always keep the verb together with the particle. So I will care for the sick man is correct because the verb and the particle are together. But if you separate them, it is wrong. I will care the sick man for is wrong. Now, there are some phrasal verbs which are separable, which means that they can be separated, the verb from the particle. So again, it is a transitive phrasal verb, which means it will take an object, and you can do these either way. So if you look at example number 1, I gave up the argument. The argument is the object of the verb gave up. We can put the argument at the end. I gave up the argument, and you are keeping the verb gave together with the particle up. But you can also separate the verb from the particle. And when you separate the verb from the particle, you get I gave, and gave is the verb. Then you get the object, the argument, which is the direct object, and then you get the particle up. This means that you can do it either way with a separable phrasal verb. You don't have to say I gave up the argument, you can. Or you can say I gave the argument up. Both of those will be correct because the verb is separable. Separable means you can break it down into two different parts. Remember, where it is inseparable, you cannot do that. So if the phrasal verb is inseparable, like care for, it is wrong to say, I will care the sick man for. But where it is separable, like gave up, you can say, I gave up the argument, or you can say, I gave the argument up. Now, if a separable phrasal verb takes a pronoun as its direct object, then the pronoun has to go between the verb and the particle. For those of you who don't know what object pronouns are, it is words like me, them, us, him, her, it, and so forth. In this instance, if the verb is a phrasal verb that is transitive, which means it takes an object, and it is separable, you have to put the object between the verb and the particle. So if we look at our example, our direct object is him, the verb is gave, and the particle is up. So our full phrasal verb is gave up, and correctly we have to say I gave him up. We cannot say I gave up him. Wherever a separable phrasal verb takes a pronoun, that pronoun has to go between the verb and the particle. The direct object, when it is a pronoun, and the phrasal verb is separable, must go in the middle of the verb and of the particle. So correct, I gave him up, and you could say I gave them up, or you could say I gave her up, but you cannot say I gave up them or I gave up her. Those would be incorrect. In a situation where the object is a pronoun, a word like me, them, us, him, her, it, you, then it has to go in the middle. Good. All right. We're going to do the homework today, so I need you all to turn with me to page 4. Sorry, I keep getting interrupted here when I am recording. All right, I need you guys to go to page 59. And what we are going to do, first of all, is 59A, which is this exercise here. It is, as you can see, a listening exercise. So all I will need you guys to do is to listen to the recording twice and then mark in your books the missing word. So for instance, the first phrasal verb is count on, and they need you to put the on there because it is missing. Alright, some of the phrasal verbs are separable, like number 3, run from, and number 6, drop something on. So they want you to put the words that are missing from the middle, which would be the object. So all you have to do is put the particle after the verb, where it is just one word showing, and where there are 2 words with a gap in the middle, they want you to put the missing words. Good. I hope you all have your pens and are ready.
Unit 3, Grammar, Activity A. 1.
I can always count on my brother to help me with the chores.
2.
I try to show up on time for school every day.
3.
Once I tried to run away from home when I was a child.
4.
Fortunately, I talked my son into cleaning the garage this weekend.
5.
I didn't know what that word meant, so I had to look it up.
6.
I decided to drop in on my father to see how he was doing.
Alright, what we're going to do, I will play this a second time.
Unit 3, Grammar, Activity A. 1.
I can always count on my brother to help me with the chores.
2.
I try to show up on time for school every day.
3.
Once I tried to run away from home when I was a child.
4.
Fortunately, I talked my son into cleaning the garage this weekend.
5.
I didn't know what that word meant, so I had to look it up.
6.
I decided to drop in on my father to see how he was doing.
Alright, your first answer, just to give an example, should have been, count on. Alright, the missing particle there was on. So if you weren't quite sure what you needed to do, it was just that first word after the word that you were given. And where there were many words missing, as in 3 and as in 6, you would have to put the words that go in the middle. Quite simple. Okay, the next exercise that we had to do was B, below. And what I needed you all to do in B is to look at the sentence first of all, and to find the phrasal verb in each sentence. When you find the phrasal verb, the verb which is 2 words composed of a verb and a particle, we need you to underline that verb. And then if the verb is transitive or intransitive, we need you to write a T in the space, or we need you to write an R in the space. So, if we have to look at number 1, and we have to do this as an example. Number 1 goes, let me turn off the italics. Let me turn off the underlining too. It doesn't want to be turned off. I don't know about this problem. But we need to work it out. All right. In this particular example, the phrasal verb is work out. And that is a transitive phrasal verb because it takes the object, it. It takes a direct object, and here the direct object is it. It also is transitive. So at the start of the text, we need to put a capital T for transitive. Okay, so when you do number 1, you should have a capital T for transitive. You should then have the sentence itself, and in that sentence you should have underlined work and out. So you have identified the phrasal verb as work out, and you have put a T there to show that it is transitive. What we need you to do in each of the next examples from 2 to 6, again, you must underline the phrasal verb. If it is transitive, you put a T for transitive, and if it is intransitive, you need to put the R next to it. Alright, if any of you have any problems with the homework, you must take it up with your speaking teacher, who will be able to explain it to you. What I want you to do when you've done the homework is to take a photo with your smartphones and send it to your regular speaking teacher. Thank you very much, gentlemen, and you will hear from me again in the next unit.